Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Lonely Wrist. Today, sitting in front of me is Marco Ferrante. What's up, brother?
Hey, how are you? Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I've been trying to get you on for a while. I knew I had to have you on. Uh, Glad to see that you're finally sitting in front of me
Yeah, no, for
digitally.
sure. It's been a little bit of a hectic week and hectic last couple of weeks for us both, right? But yeah, I know I'm glad to be here, and let's get into it. Let's do it.
Hopefully now with some sales under your belt for this week, so you don't have to worry about the end of the week. But
Yeah, no, November, December is always like the best time of the year for kind of the watch industry in terms of like, sales, even just volume, but like numbers as well. So yeah, it's the busiest time of the year. It's the best time, I think, because it's like the most rewarding time for me. For me, like watches have always been a passion of mine. The sales kind of come secondary, but like getting, new watches on people's wrists, I think it's such a fulfilling job because, I get to see passionate watch people kind of live out their wristwatch dreams, so to speak. So that's the most rewarding part of the job by far. And now is the best time, and I get to see some of the coolest pieces. I think in the world.
I know, yeah, I watch your Instagram posts and I'm like, another banger going out, another banger.
Yep.
Tell me what got you into watches, and how you ended up in the industry.
Yeah, so I got into watches now almost 10 years ago. So I was 16 at the time. I bought an Orient Explorer off like this Canadian, Backpage Craigslist type website, not knowing anything about the watch. It was just this kind of funky, super busy. Like I think it had like a power reserve. It had a power reserve indicator, a date at 6 o'clock, like a date wheel, and then it had like what's it called, a world time function, and like a bunch of outer scales that you could do. It was a super funky watch that it was so busy. That's what kind of attracted me to it. And when I went in person, I think I paid like 200 or 300 bucks for it at the time. And when I went in person, I didn't know anything about mechanical watches. I'd owned Citizen and Armani and that kind of stuff, but I didn't consider myself a watch collector. I wouldn't have considered myself kind of a watch collector at the time. And man, as soon as I turned that watch around and saw the mechanical movement, I was like kind of like, whoa, what's this? And ever since then, my curiosity was piqued. And I guess you can only get so much of Rolex and Patek and AP and all that kind of stuff that most people tend to talk about. So the watch world is so expansive that there's so much to learn all the time, and that's what really keeps the hobby fresh and interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you can spend decades, if not lifetimes, learning about
Well,
watches,
just
and
one brand,
yeah,
literally. Well, you can spend a whole lifetime just on one brand. Absolutely.
it's crazy. So obviously that's the early days. I originally saw you on, of course, on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
And then we have mutual friends, and then what made you transition into actually dealing watches? Like, okay, this is something that I want to pursue as a career.
Yeah, it's funny, it kind of just the opportunity presented itself to me as opposed to me seeking it out, right? So a lot of people know me originally, I guess, in watches from either my personal, channel on YouTube, or doing live streams with JJ, and even back in the day with RT Luxury, all that kind of stuff. And it was a great time, kind of just talking watches and whatnot. And back then, I actually got, or was found, I guess, through the live streams by Nico Leonard, who's in the industry, probably the biggest YouTuber on the platform. And at the time, he kind of pitched to me, "Hey, Marco, you ever consider working in watches?" And at the time I was in university, I worked in wealth management. I had just quit my job, kind of at the start of COVID. I was just like, "Hey, listen, I'll just kind of figure it out and see where things could take me after I graduate." And I fully planned. I had actually opportunity to work either in consulting, or I had an interview lined up to work in consulting or in wealth management. And, I kind of told Nico about it. He's like, "Listen, I'd love for you to consider it. How about I kind of fly you out to Ireland?" So I actually went out to Ireland and got to meet
Nice.
Nico, got to see his whole operation there. And listen, things didn't work out from there just because it was, listen, Ireland is halfway around the world. It was pretty difficult. I was 20 years old. It's a 24-hour kind of plane ride to get back home. So it's a long ways away. I don't think I was ready for that kind of distance at the time. And back then, Nico was a very, very small channel. To put into context, he had maybe 100,000 subscribers. His business was much smaller than it is today. Obviously now he's the biggest YouTuber on the platform. Has a huge, pride and opinion. Is definitely a titan, I would say, in the industry. So yeah, props to him. He's built something amazing. But back then it was just a little bit smaller, a bit too risky, I felt, for me. So it was just not something that worked out. And then I was actually able to meet a ton of people, through Nico, Roman being one of them. And that's when I was pitched by Roman. He reached out to me and said, "Hey, Marco, I heard things didn't kind of work out with Nico. Would you ever consider working for me in Philadelphia?" And again, I was kind of the same thing. Hey, listen, I don't know if I really want to do this. He's like, it's a totally different operation from Nico. Let me get you out to Philly and let's see what happens. And from there, kind of the rest is history.
Yeah, and I mean, I originally had saw you on, of course, the Great Market series, and you were always the watch wizard, right? Where Roman would throw you under the bus. It's like, Tell me, what do you know about this watch, right?
Right.
Like off the cuff. So I can already imagine being on a reality type show is already a unique experience, right? And
Sure.
how has the time on the Great Market series kind of influenced your career, not only as a dealer, but now kind of being a personality and influencer? Like,
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't really think of myself that way, but I guess people do. Which is,
I do.
for me, I call myself a jag, right? Just a guy. I'm just like an average watch collector, like anybody else. I swear to God, there's nothing special about me. And but it's so cool to hear people's feedback and hear their stories, how they got into watching. For me, that's the most fulfilling part, right? If I've accomplished anything, is being able to meet so many amazing collectors, because I get to learn from their collective experience in terms of collecting, in terms of watches that they've experienced, but also just in terms of their overall insight, be it in life and business or everything else. So that has been such a rewarding aspect, in my opinion, just working in the industry. It really opens doors to people I would have never otherwise met if I worked in the banking industry back home in Montreal, right? So that has been, without question, the most amazing part, is all the people, right? The watches are great, but the people, I think, really make this hobby what it is.
Yeah, I actually sold pretty much all the watch brands as an AD. I think that's what you're doing now. You kind of came from the Great Market, went to the AD other side, light and dark side, right? In a weird way.
Yeah, it's
But
interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting. So Bernese Jewelry is an AD now for over 20 brands, and we also buy and sell pre-owned. We have a huge pre-owned inventory as well, which is kind of more what I manage. I sell new watches here and there. Like I sold a Speedmaster to a member of the Hangout. I sold a UN Freak recently, a Freak One, which is awesome, and I sold a Tudor Black Bay and that kind of stuff. And it's different because a lot of the time on the gray market, the clientele of a gray market and the authorized dealer is totally different, right? A lot of the time at the AD, you're going to work with either seasoned collectors or someone totally new to the hobby, right? Whereas the gray market tends to be a lot more seasoned collectors, right? So it's kind of interesting, the duality between both the AD and the gray market, but it's definitely awesome. It's definitely awesome.
I had a hard time when I was at the AD because, like you, I was passionate about watches, and there was people there. Like, I did it as a side gig, right? I was waiting for my wife to come back from Europe, and I had a lot of free time, and I was like, okay, let me take a little job at a watch dealer, talk about watches, hang out with watch nerds. But I always found a struggle between balancing like the passion and the business, right? Because I was the guy that was like, you don't want to buy that piece of shit. Like, don't buy that watch. Like, and meanwhile, there's people sitting next to me that are like trying to put food on the table. And, in the city I live in, Las Vegas, like, is all sharks, right? All shark salesmen, like snake oil salesmen, like, will sell you anything they can, right? But I'm the guy that's like, no, don't buy this. Like, what are you doing?
And
So
I'm the same way, right? Because the watch, listen, the watch industry is small. To a certain extent, everybody knows everybody, or at least everybody communicates with each other. Even, customers who come to buy from you. And I'm the same way. I operate on extreme transparency, to the point where I even have some customers, I tell them my cost of goods, which no dealer really wants to share that kind of stuff, right? But I'm like,
sure.
listen, this is what I'm making in between. I'm trying to be as fair to you as possible. This is what I need to make the deal happen. If it's good, great. If not, then no problem. But yeah, I'm with you. Listen, if I don't recommend something, or I think it's no good for somebody, I will tell them point blank, because for me, I'm not in the industry to be here for 2 minutes and make the most money possible. That's a very short term, very short sighted vision. At the end of the day, I understand that if I take care of somebody, I will get not only their repeat business, their referral business, but also it's about reputation, right? And my reputation, to me, is very, very important. And so I will go out of my way to take care of somebody as best as I can. And if that means giving up a sale, then it's not an issue for me.
Yeah, I looked at it as every person that came through the door, like for me, this was an opportunity to build a friendship, a connection, because friends are loyal, right? Like if you're just looking at it, hey, I'm trying to build a customer base, like, they're gonna go where the price goes, like where they get the best discount, where, it's
It's
convenient for them.
transactional. It's very
Yeah,
transactional.
exactly. And that to me is the downfall of a sales professional. But still, how do you balance passion and the business side? That was something I always struggled with.
It's very difficult. It's something that I will say that since joining Berdeen's, the passion side of things has really kicked up, right? There was a time I would say that like you would start to resent watches that you can't sell or that are difficult to sell. It's like,
Yep.
oh, this sucks because not because it's a bad watch, but because it's something that's not easy to sell, right? It's almost like if you've heard of this scientific experiment, like Pavlov's dog, right, where when he
Yeah.
rings a bell, like he starts to salivate because he thinks food is coming. So, like, if you tell a watch dealer Rolex, Patek, AP, they start to salivate because essentially it's easy sales, right? That's the idea. But
Yeah.
the point is you start to look away from these amazing brands. There's so much this industry has to offer just because it's a little bit more difficult to sell. The discounts have to be a little bit there. Maybe the time of sale is a little bit harder. There's a lot more questions, a lot more nuance to it, and annoying little things. Maybe sometimes you wake up on the wrong side of the bed you don't want to deal with, but that's just what it is, right? And I would say that we have such a variety here at Berdeen's that obviously we sell Rolex, Patek, AP, all that kind of good stuff, but for me, the where my passion lies really is in the other stuff, right? I feel like stuff around the edges is always the most interesting, if you will, and that's kind of a difficult thing to balance. That's still something that I try to balance as best as I can, and it's not there's no real solution or formula to this. It's really an ongoing war all the time.
Yeah, there's so much value to be had. Pretty recently, like, I went on the interest list for an Explorer One dealer called. They have a huge pre-owned inventory, and I went in. I just was like, "Am I getting ready to pay like 8 grand out the door retail for this Explorer One?" And then I started going to their pre-owned section, and I got a Seamaster 300, like the Heritage with the 8912, like the jumping hour. And I was like, "This is like first of all, it's the cheapest one I've ever seen. It was like 3,500 or like 3,800 or something. I mean, it's like tremendous value. Box papers complete. And I was like, I think they mismarked it. But anyways, such a tremendous value to be had on the pre-owned market. It really makes me kind of shy away from buying watches at retail, right? Like I am on Moda. I'm always looking for a good deal. Like I'm always looking for something to add. Um, and it's just I feel like it's I don't know if underserved is the right word, but you have to be an experienced buyer to kind of
Yeah.
navigate that marketplace because a lot of people they just don't want to do it. They're like, how do I know it's real? How do I know this? How do I know that? Like, how do I know I'm not getting scammed? Like, I'm sending somebody from Facebook money. Who is this? Like, um, but curiously, I mean, I've seen on the series, the Great Market series, like you've been in some pretty epic watch deals. What is the one that sticks out? Like you'll be telling the story for the next decade, like memorable deal of a lifetime.
Oh man, I mean, there's a lot of them. There really is. Like, I just recently sold the like literally last week a John Mayer
I saw
Omar.
that. Yeah,
So
that was
that
crazy.
was yeah. So that's an exceptional watch. But for sure, my favorite sale of all time, and it's my biggest sale ever, is two watches. So I sold the 5167R, which is a rose gold Aquanaut on a brown rubber strap, brown dial, and I sold the Rainbow Daytona. And at the time, I think the total all-in sale was 540 odd thousand or something like that. And we just got a clean wire for it for that much. And that's that's the one I was like, damn, that's I felt really good about it at the time. And I still do. And listen, I'm still in touch with that client. He's my biggest client and somebody I'm very, very fortunate I could call a friend. And yeah, he's awesome. He's the best.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy. And I mean just to think about, first of all, these banks, like they don't want transactions like this to happen, right? Like I
Yeah.
think about it all the time.
Yeah,
Because
there's a lot of alarm signals that go off, and you have to call, like the bank will call you to verify and all that kind of stuff. It's very complex. It's no doubt about it. When you're dealing with this kind of transaction, it's not a swipe my credit card and I'll walk out with the watch kind of deal.
I, even then, like my debit card only lets me charge like $6,000 right
Right,
per day, and I'm like, well, can I pay $6,000 today and $6,000 tomorrow?
right, exactly.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it becomes annoying, and these banks just want to hold on to all of our money. But curiously, now you've transitioned, right? You're at Birdines, and you are literally doing. I mean, you're doing some crazy content. I mean, I saw your watch collection video. Awesome collection.
Thank you.
It's very cool that you see that side of somebody because it kind of shows like who you really are in a unique
Yeah.
way. I don't think I've ever shown off my entire collection, and I mean, well, maybe once or twice, but not really like out there. Um, but I mean, it seems like you guys are kind of trying to break down some misconceptions in the industry, I'd say. And you're trying to kind of, progress the industry. So when I say that, like, I don't think you've ever been asked, are there any misconceptions about the watch industry that you're trying to dispel? Where do you see your platform, your newfound platform heading?
Yeah, I mean, I'll come back to your question. I guess the opportunity with Berdines I thought was so interesting because it's at least in Chicago, it's very, very well known. They have a very strong, retail brick and mortar presence, but online for the most part, almost nobody really knows about them, and that's where I really found something that was a huge opportunity there, right? So like the whole point I think of the Berdines platform is to elevate the customer experience, right? And that's kind of what I also want to do, but to a certain extent with Berdines as well, it's all about transparency and treating people with dignity and respect. For us, there's no pay for play schemes. We're going to be forthright with you. There's no buy this to get that. That's not the way that we operate. We have, like, for example, a Vacheron authorized dealer, which, okay, Vacheron isn't what it was back in 2022, but for the most part, it's still not easy to get watches from them. But we operate on extreme transparency, but also we just tell it how it is. And I think that's kind of the approach that I've always had in the industry, right? Is that I operate on extreme honesty. I have nothing to hide. Anybody who's ever kind of dealt with me can, for the most part, knows that I'm just a straightforward person, right? It's like I have nothing to really be ashamed of or unhappy about, or really, I guess not just be straightforward about. So that's really the point, I think, also with our communication strategy and what I want to do with our social media content. I have a video coming up that's actually talking about why I don't think AP is worth buying at retail anymore. For the amount of spend that you're going to have to do, and essentially for the amount of essentially toe kissing is what I call it. Kiss their
Yeah.
toes and get on your knees and pray to the AP gods that you'll get the watch that you want. It's just not even financially worth it anymore. And I want to dispel this notion that the AD is the best way to go, because it just isn't. I'm sorry, the time spent, the money spent, the money lost, and the time lost that you're waiting for watches that in most cases you're not even getting considered for, and yet you have this extensive purchase history, and on top of it you have to deal with essentially an environment where you're going out of your way to spend your money, and then somehow you're supposed to be essentially thanking them for you spending your money with them. I don't understand that. So there's a lot of, I guess, industry myths or like things that I want to tackle, but number one for me is really expanding the pre-owned market. And for those who have kind of misconceptions about it, because either they've been burnt by people or they've had negative experiences with other people, it shouldn't shy them away from the amazing opportunities and value and the expansive brands and watches that are out there to be had.
Yeah, one of my friends works at an AP external boutique,
Okay.
and he'll text me like some of the shit that's in the back, and it's crazy to see all the stuff that comes through that they pretend like they don't
They don't
have.
have, right. It's I have to be honest, it's unbelievable. Like
It
some of the
is.
stuff that they pull, right, is in any other business, it would be considered blackmail, but somehow it's not. That just hey, it is what it is. What are you gonna do?
I had put my name down for an offshore diver
Yeah.
here, and
Which, by the
of
way,
course,
that's a watch in steel that trades universally under retail, right? Like
totally.
if you try to trade it in, every dealer in the world is going to offer you under retail for. Sorry, I don't mean
Yep.
to interrupt you.
100%. No. So, this was like, I put my name on the list in probably like 2021, 2022. And then I'd say like maybe like 6 or 8 months ago, he calls me and says, "Hey Blake, like I want you to come in. I haven't talked to you in a while, da 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 da." And I was thinking in my mind, I was like, what do you want from me? What do you want me to do? Like, do you just want me to sit down and have a coffee with you? Like, what's this about? And
Right.
then I knew he was gonna offer me some bullshit. And then sure enough, he was like, hey, I've got the offshore diver if you still want it. And I was like, dude, I've been offered this watch like 3 times before you called me, like in every color, like the green, the blue, and then they have I can't think of the other. Yeah. The gray. Yeah. I've been offered this in every color, like, and no, yeah, sorry, I'm not buying this. But anyways, because a lot's changed in 2 years, and then when you try that watch on, it's a 42 millimeter, but it just wears like shit. Like, let me just call it the way it is. It just
Yeah,
wears
I
like
mean,
shit.
listen, the old divers I think were a lot worse than the new ones. I think that they made a
Totally.
lot of improvements in terms of the case and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the flare out is still there, right? And that's the thing, a 42 millimeter offshore, where it's probably closer to a 44 millimeter watch. You need to have, for lack of a better term, you need to have the girth of the wrist. Like it has to be, you have to have a big wrist to wear.
Yeah.
That's just the truth. And the probably the worst part of all of that is now probably AP will be very hesitant to call you back just because you changed your mind about a watch. And that's what's the craziest. Like I don't understand. Like what? Like how? I don't get it. But yeah, that's what it is.
This is the face of a guy that doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, there you go. That's
Uh,
the attitude I think you should have. Absolutely.
And no. So to give a little bit of context, like me and Bubba Hotep, I'm sure you probably know Bubba
Yeah,
Hotep.
yeah,
He and I like are like really close friends. Like he flies out, we see each other. Like we did Christmas together, we did Thanksgiving together. I think we're doing Thanksgiving together this year. But anyways, good friend of mine, and he knows that like I religiously wear like a 44 Panerai. So I'm not scared to get like a chunky watch, right? But even then, it still wore like I could literally put my finger through like the lugs, like
right.
where it came. It's just, anyways, yeah. I think AP is fallen from grace, especially with their leadership changes. I mean, and I have a bunch of friends that are asking me like, because I'm not a dealer. I'm gonna give people, like you, like unbiased advice. Like, hey, what do you think about the codes? Like, should I like? I wouldn't buy a code, like
Yeah.
personally. Um, and that leads us kind of like right into our another question. But I mean, the watch market is evolving so rapidly. Trends are changing right now in front of us. What do you? And I know you don't have a crystal ball, like none of us do. But how do you think the market will evolve in the next few years?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I ask myself that probably on a day-to-day basis. I was a buyer for my previous company. I'm a buyer for Berdines, and that's the most difficult part of the business. And I will explain it like this: selling a watch is not as difficult as you may think. It's actually getting the product and getting the right price for the product, right? Because finding an end user, or even a dealer, for example, to sell to, there's so many avenues to sell a watch nowadays, right? Chrono, eBay, Moda, Facebook groups. You can list it privately, and there's so many avenues out there to actually sell a watch. It's getting the product is the most challenging part of the equation, and then pricing it correctly is even more difficult. So to put into context, I started, at Luxury Bazaar back in April 2022, which I consider to be the absolute peak of the watch market. That was literally when prices were the absolute highest. And then from there, we saw precipitous decline, right? So, I basically started at the highest point you can get at. and saw the watch market decline. For example, like a Panda Daytona go from 60,000 to about, let's say 30,000 today, right? And it's very difficult to keep track of it, but it's a daily thing. And I'm in a ton of chats where I can see the price action every single day, and that's the only way you can keep track of it, because there's no real monitor for pricing. You ask a dealer what would he pay for something, like 10 different dealers what they would pay for something, and I always like to say you'll get 12 different prices. That's just what it is. So where's the watch industry going? It's a great question. I think the watch industry swung really hard one way because we had a huge influx of new buyers, and you see this in a lot of markets, right, where essentially you have a new influx of buyers. The pendulum will swing an extreme way one way and then an extreme way another way, right? And we saw that, right, over the last kind of 2 years where prices decline pretty sharply, pretty quickly. And I think at some point, and even now, we're reaching more of a stabilization point, not across the board, but there's a lot of watches even now currently that are going up in price. Patek 5712 in steel currently is up in price over the last 6 months. That's just the reality of things. There's other watches out there I could point to, but that's just the one that comes to mind. So, it's not a very it's not just a decline for every single model. It's very much a model by model basis. Where do I see it in the next couple of years? I'm pretty bullish. I think the amount of watch buyers in the industry, the amount of people that are in the industry, the size of collections have grown to such an extent that I think that you'll still see a huge amount of potential over the next couple of years. Will it be the price points that we saw back in 2022? Probably not. There's just not as much money out there on the market. They're not printing as much money as they did back then.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel a very bullish sentiment for the watch market in general. And one thing I always say is the volume, the sales volume in terms of units is still there. Actually, at Berdeen's, we've sold almost 20% more pre-owned units than last year.
Wow.
The prices are different, right? But we've sold more volume than we did last year, which is kind of an interesting phenomenon when you consider it, because the market is down. In theory, the psychology of sellers would be, oh, well, it's a down market, I don't know if I want to buy it, but the volume is still there. It's just the prices aren't there. And I think that has to do with the kind of the pendulum swing of pricing, right? Extreme way one way when we saw the influx of buyer, and then an extreme way another when the market actually declined. And I think we'll reach a point where we'll hit bottom, and then from there we'll see the prices start to increase again, like we saw in 2008.
I've noticed too, like if anybody's watched any of your content, they know and they understand that you appreciate the undervalued watches.
Yeah.
I know, for example, your mono pusher chronograph
I love that watch.
is one that you've talked about, but I'm sure that changes daily. So today I'm asking you, give us some what you feel like are underrated pieces. And I mean, obviously, let's do the flip side of the coin. Watches that, I mean, I'm probably sure I know what you're going to say, but watches that are overhyped.
Yeah.
So let's do underhyped, overhyped.
Sure. I mean, undervalued, I think, I'll go to a lot of the key brands. I think, for example, I have a Mont Blanc mono pusher chronograph, which, this is a manual winding, high horology finished mono pusher chronograph from a company called Minerva, who does only 100 movements. And if you could snag one under $20,000, I can't think of that level of watchmaking at around $20,000. I mean, we're talking about hand finishing, super crazy in-house calibers for mono pusher chronograph. It's amazing. But if we're sticking to the big brands, I think something like a Breguet 5817, a Marine in stainless steel under 10,000, I think is an insane value for literally a handmade watch. I just can't pull out the proportions, but if I could, I would own that wristwatch. I think A. Lange & Söhne has a lot of opportunity, like a Lanka 1. Even the Saxonias have come down in price dramatically, where there's just, I mean, you can get a Lanka now, which is a superbly finished watch all day long, under $20,000. In modern case sizes also, this is not just like 36, 37. I'm talking about even 40 millimeter Saxonias that sell under $20,000, which I think is just a steal of a deal. I think also there's a lot of value to be had right now. Probably the best value to be had is in Vacheron Constantin. You could pick up traditionals like I bought under $20,000, 1942s under $20,000. The 1921s have come up in price over the last kind of 6 to 10 months. But you could still pick up, a rose gold model under $25,000, which for a watch that retails for 40, I think is just such an insane deal considering all the artisanal qualities you get in that wristwatch. If we're talking under 10,000, there's so many brands out there that you can look at. Glashütte Original is another amazing watch brand. You get so much bang for your buck. IWC, I think, is at a really attractive price point. If you're willing to look outside of Rolex, there's so many amazing brands out there to be had. Brands of watches and designs out there to be had under 10,000, under 20,000, and I would say like even under 50,000 right now. There's so many snags. It's unbelievable, really.
What about some of the watches that you feel are just getting so much hype that just don't deserve it?
Man, the market has shifted a lot, right? So like in the past, I would tell you the Royal Oak, but the Royal Oak is probably the worst performing, watch in terms of secondary resale value over the last 12 months. Listen, I think I'm not a big proponent of the Nautilus. I'm not a huge fan of it. It's never been my personal preference, but I'd say the one watch that I always tell people is probably the most overhyped watch is a Patek Philippe Aquanaut reference 5167A, specifically that one. I like the 5164, but since they discontinued it also, I think the price points are crazy. Like you're going to pay probably $70,000 for a steel travel time watch.
Yeah.
I just think it's outrageous. And a 5167, for a newer condition, like let's say 2020 plus, you're paying over 50 grand for that watch or around 50,000 for that watch. So I tell this to people all the time. They don't really believe me because, they see so many people talk about it like, oh my God, it's a Patek, Aquanaut. Wow, it's amazing. But this is a stainless steel rubber strap watch that just has a time only movement. And when people like try it on in person, the overwhelming sentiment, not all the time, but the overwhelming sentiment is, whoa, I thought this was, I thought this would wear a little bit differently, and not in a good way. It really just, not that it's a cheap watch, it's just not worth what it sells for on the secondary market, in my opinion. It's just a plain stainless steel rubber strap watch. I think it's a wonderful $30,000 watch. Would I pay more than that? Probably not for me personally. And listen, people have their own tastes and styles, but I think the Patek Philippe Aquanaut is the go-to that I say because I see it all the time. And I've sold many of them, but many of the times I hear people saying like, when they actually get the watch, hey, this is awesome. And then maybe a few months later, they're like, this is not what I thought it would be.
At my local dealer here, they have a huge pre-owned kind of section, and they have one of the transitional year 5167s steel for like 100 grand. I don't know, like, I mean, I don't know.
No, exactly. So it's not a 5167. It's the 38 millimeter probably that they have, which
Could
is
be.
So they made for a very, very short period. So regular Aquanaut 5167 is 40 millimeters, but for a very short, I think it was like 3 years max. They made a 38 millimeter one, which sells for around 100 grand, which is even worse. Like, listen, I'm sorry, but I'm not paying for less diameter. Again, that's just my personal opinion. I don't see the value in that watch at all. But that's just my opinion.
Nevertheless, it's been sitting there for like 2 years. So yeah, I'm sure it'll sit there for another 2 years or maybe longer. Yeah. So now you transitioned, right? You transitioned from working with Luxury Bazaar. Now you're at Burdeen's. And, we've talked about this kind of being two different sides of the coin. And I mean, it seems like you're going all in on social media, which is something I traditionally don't do. I just do content for passion, post it, and hope people find it. I don't really push it. But I'm assuming with the rise of course, social media, online platforms, and, it's kind of pushed traditional dealers into a new kind of like uncomfortable zone for them. Do you really think, do you feel like the traditional ADs are keeping up with that model, or do you feel like they're just going to kind of think in the normal sense that they have for the past decades? Hey, we have product, we open the doors, people come in.
Yeah, it's like I said earlier, right? The hardest part is getting the product to a certain extent, right? But also a part of the equation is selling it too, right? And we've seen that watch sales has changed dramatically over the last decade, right? Over the last 5 years, it's changed dramatically. And the reason for that is social media, no doubt about it. And I think it's the greatest tool to ultimately find new collectors, right? If not for anything else, then at the very least, find a community, or join the watch community online. And that has been such a valuable asset to so many collectors because, again, rather than meeting people in person, it's virtual, but you still get to learn from the collective experience and ownership experiences of other people, right? And that's where the real value lies. Obviously, part of it is marketing yourself, marketing your business, no doubt about it. But it just gives you the opportunity to meet new collectors and really join the watch industry in a different way, right? Where were we looking for information, right? I could tell you personally, I was looking at online forums, watching Tim Mosso watch reviews, and that kind of stuff. And now that's kind of really out the window. There's just so many forms of content, specifically digital content, especially as our attention spans become less and less. We're going to read far less print media and watch far more visual content just because it's so much easier and quicker to consume, right? And I think that is without question kind of the future of the industry. And it's currently the present already, right? It's changed dramatic. I mean, you've seen dealers like, probably the most famous one on TikTok is Moses, right? And
Yeah.
I got to meet Moses and meet his dad as well. And he told me something and said, "Listen, Marco, if it wasn't for TikTok and Instagram and all that, we had maybe 6 to 12 months left, and then we would have had to close up shop." And now he's one of the most popular watch dealers in the world, right? So you think about that. I mean, it's unbelievable how social media could change a business. And Moses is one of the nicest people you'll meet in this industry. A great, great guy, and I have nothing but great things to say about it. And so, what otherwise would have been, a struggling business became kind of an overnight success to a lot of people. A lot of people don't see the hard work, but social media showcases that and really humanizes the people who are selling the watches and shows off the product in a way that I think, traditional ADs just don't capture effectively through the kind of walk-in model, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, you kind of bring a good point that the market has evolved, especially what people consume online. And like if you look at it like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, like the TikTok watch deals were
Yeah,
like all the thing, like the negotiations, and
right.
now it's like, dude, come on. Like I
Yeah,
don't
it's
ever
still
want to
it
see
still
more.
irks me when they throw watches over a glass counter, but hey, it's okay. That's their model, and that's how they enjoy doing it. So no problem.
It it's so cringy to me now, like when I think about it.
Yeah.
And I never really got into it, but I've met a couple of the people that do that, like watch Jules and stuff like that. Like I saw her about at JCK Couture. Like they
Okay.
have the vintage watch show that's like
Mhm.
parallel to that. And I saw her, and I talked to her for like a brief second, and I kind of was like, it seems like she's kind of milking it. I mean, I don't mean to throw shade, but like, come on, come up with something a little bit more clever. I think instead of just the deals, the negotiation videos. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
tired of seeing it.
Yeah, and you know what? That's the difficult part, right? About making content. I could tell you because I do it so often, is coming up with new interesting topics to talk about,
Totally.
right? That's the thing. It's like, listen, I've been doing content now for almost 3, 4, 5 years. If you go back to the live streaming days, like there's only so many different ways I could talk about watches or bring up topics that doesn't become repetitive and that is still very current. And the thing is deals was always fun because people love to watch the entrepreneurial side of things, right? Like
Sure.
they love to see how a business is built, how a business is run, and learn from it themselves to potentially even do it themselves or even just for entertainment. Listen, I love that side of things. It was great. It's super entertaining to watch, even still to this day. But to a certain extent, I agree. It's either you adapt or die, and sometimes you have to kind of try new things, and that's just some people do, some people don't, and you kind of just have to figure it out as you go along. There's no real thing, like plan in place or formula to follow. I tell people this all the time. They ask me like, "Oh, well, how'd you get in the industry? What should I do? What should I read?" And I'm really passionate about watches. I want to get into the industry. Listen, there's no formula. I got lucky to a certain extent that I was found on YouTube, and I just happened to follow my passion, and it ended up working out. But it may not be the case in some cases, right? Sometimes you just try things and it doesn't work out. But I always say I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can to do what I can, and that's certainly true for content. And I try to evolve and do interesting things, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and you go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I get a lot of questions too because I come from a creative background. A lot of the people that are in the industry now, they don't come from the creative side. So they always have that challenge of coming up with new content. Um, I have, I've spoken about, I don't think, maybe I've spoken about this before, but I have like a content pool. So like I literally will have these spurts. It's just kind of like waves, they come and go. Like you have a huge wave of creativity. You write down a bunch of shit. Then you're like, what the hell do I do? Like, I don't know oh, cool. I got my content pool. I literally have had so many of those waves, like within the past like 6 months. I on my list, I have almost like 800 or 900 concepts that I
Yeah,
want to execute. And that includes YouTube, podcasts, guests. It kind of helps me kind of go back to like a default like point where I'm like, okay, I've got plenty of stuff to do when I don't know what to do, and that
yeah,
can kind of save me. Um, let's kind of segue again, and I know this, but I'm gonna ask it anyways. In your collection video, you kind of showcased off your collection, and
which by the way,
obvi-
totally changed since I filmed that video, but it's all good.
so tell us, like on public record, like what's changed with your collection?
Yeah. I mean, you know what? I am a complete. I don't want to say the word, but I am a complete watch flipper. Let's call it right. Like I
Okay,
will. There's very little. Like the only watch I would say that will always stay in my collection. I would sell all my earthly possessions before I sell this as my back row, and
yep.
not because I'm a huge Rolex guy or a Rolex fan. It's the story behind it, right? The whole. For those who know, they kind of know the story of how I got it. I got it through the live stream, and it was this crazy kind of situation, and. But yeah, other than that, everything is fair game for me to sell pretty much. And I've been in and out of probably 30 or 40 watches over the last kind of 2 to 3 years, just because you're in the industry, you get great deals, you try new things. And I'm not one to really wear our inventory. It's not my watch, so I feel kind of guilty wearing something I don't own. It's like driving somebody else's car for me. I don't, I
Yeah.
get, I don't like that. So yeah, that's kind of the thing. So currently I have a Mr. GG Shock. I have my back row. I have, which I call the Bruce Wayne, by the way, the real Bruce Wayne. This is the dressed up version of the Batman. I have also my Mont Blanc Mountain Pusher chronograph, and I have the new watch that I just showcased in a new video on Berdine's Jewelry YouTube channel, which is the Vacheron Traditionnel with the blue dial, which was a limited edition of 15 pieces. So I'm steering clear of everything else for the time being. I'm at 3 and a G, as our friend Ali calls it, right? Just 3 watches and a G Shock, and I kind of like it. It's difficult to stay down to 3 watches, but I'm trying my best to do that.
I envy you because I can't do it. Like I've got so many watches. I don't even. I think last time I kind of have maybe 150 watches.
Man, it's unreal.
It's insane. And somebody asked me like, how do you decide what to wear? I don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
it's just a feeling, right? You just kind of look at your watch, like, oh, I'm going to wear this today.
and then I was talking to some friends and I was trying to figure out how I could dwindle down, and they came up with the same concept that you like. You talk about clothes. Oh, if you haven't worn it in 6 months, just get rid of it. You
Yeah,
know. But then I kind of corner myself because I buy watches as like mementos. Like, oh, cool. I remember when I got engaged, I got this watch, or when I got married, I wore this watch, or I had a monumental moment in my career, and I bought this watch, and I'm like, how do I get rid of those watches because I've layered them around life events, and I find it very conflicting.
yeah. You know what? It's something that I struggle with as well. So I had a PAM 183. It was my first luxury watch, and that was a really really important watch to me because it was my first luxury watch. Like the first watch that really hurt, as we call it, right? Like
Yeah.
it hurt to buy it and see the money
Sure.
leave my account, kind of thing. And also it was a watch that I wore kind of in the last year of my grandfather's life, who was probably the most important person in my life ever. And that was really difficult. Losing him was really difficult, and the watch was there with me. But to a certain extent, it was something that my friend JJ from the watch hangout kind of said to me was, listen, at the end of the day, you'll always have those memories with you. The watches just add to those memories, if that makes sense, right? And listen, do I regret selling it sometimes? Do I think, man, I wish I kept it? Not really. Ever since I sold it, I never really looked back on it. The first month or so, you kind of miss it, but after that, time heals all wounds, so to speak. And it becomes like, oh wow, that's a great memory. I remember owning my Pam 183 and being by my grandfather's side while he was still alive and when he ultimately passed away. And again, I think the memories will always stay, even though you mark an occasion with the watch, which is, I think, just as special as owning the watch itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. I still have a hard time. I mean, I guess I
Oh,
haven't
it's so
transitioned.
difficult. It's so difficult, man.
I mean,
Owning a watch is so hard.
JJ has such a
He's a
non.
flipper to the core. Flipper to the core. I love it.
I mean,
Yeah,
he has JJSW. Like, let's just
yeah,
be
yep,
real. Like, but he is a very non-emotional collector,
yeah.
And all the collectors that I would say that are in my inner circle that I communicate with, that are friends, that I mean, they're very emotional collectors. And I think I fall into that side where I'm like a punk rock emo collector. You know what I mean? Like if I was in music, I would be an emo because I just can't get rid of watches like that. Um, you've talked about the community, the watch collecting community. Uh, how have you seen the community evolve since you got in to where it is, now?
Oh man, it's changed so much. The people are, there's so many more people. It's just the amount of people, right? I don't think I think it's changed in the sense that, like the flippers or the people who are in it for like money kind of thing have left. I think they pretty much all left the hobby at this point, right? Because, listen, the market isn't what it used to be. And I think also part of the equation is just the amount of people. There's just an overwhelming amount of people who have joined this hobby over the last 5 years. And again, I always say the watches are amazing, but the people really make this hobby great.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we have a watch club here in Vegas, and we have about 100 or so members. And going to the events is more about the people than it is because everybody's always bringing their watches. Hey, I picked this up. I picked that up. Da
Right.
da 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 da. And it's more about the people than it is about the products or the watches or and it's weird because I'd say everybody who I've met at a watch event, like somehow like we get each other. You know what I mean? It's like you and I are like on different levels, but we're the same dude. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
the secret handshake, right? Like you guys,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And it feels kind of interesting. I mean, it feels great to know that like I'm not the only weird one out there who's obsessed with these little things that you wear on your wrist. Um, and yeah, I mean, just the community has been so supportive. I mean, especially if you like, I mean, from our journey, like you can look, I mean, at our entire podcast roster. And this has been a project that's been going for about a year now, like a year and a half. And the amount of stuff that we've been able to do in a year and a half is just insane.
right.
Insane. Like I was at the Panerai factory in March shooting content with the CEO. I just filmed a Zenith factory tour. I've got a Beauvais factory tour I'm working with on right now. Like, I mean, just the amount of stuff that we've been able to do. And I'm working on some stuff with IWC. Like, just the amount of stuff that we've been able to do, and the community has just been insane. And that's, I think, why I'll never leave. Right.
Yeah, there's so getting in the industry is actually not as difficult as you may think, right? There's so
No.
little barriers to entry. I think everybody is just so friendly and welcoming. Everyone except for Audemars Piguet. Not the big stuff, but like there's like your key brands that are kind of think very highly of themselves. Let's say, no, but that was a joke aimed at AP. But for the most part, everybody is so friendly and amazing to work with, and you'd really be surprised. It's like, people are sometimes afraid to try a watch on. I'm like, guys, this is the whole reason why you're here. Like, no, you have to try these watches on. Like, or they're afraid to talk to people, all that kind of good stuff, and that's really what makes the hobby special.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and we have a lot of the guys in our group that they're not like big money collectors, right? Like, I mean, you find yourself in a small hobby like watch collecting, and then somehow we get segmented into like how much disposable income we have, which is weird. And we have a lot of the guys that we just did an event with Ulysse Nardon, and like 6 or 7 out of the 100 people, in our watch group that get the invites like showed up, and I find myself like kind of like wondering like why, why are more people not showing up? Um, and then I started talking to some of the founding guys, and we just thought that the barrier of entry was too high. Like not everybody is comfortable coming to an event with UN where UN's going to talk about product and this and that. Maybe they feel bad. Maybe they don't even have 12 grand in their bank account, enough to even afford the cheapest UN or whatever, right? And
Right.
that's totally okay. I hope that has been clear from my founding days starting this community, that that's clear. And I even tell the brands who are doing events with us, like, don't expect us to buy a bunch of your watches. Like, come here, support the community. Watches are a long sale. They're not like, like, even look at car sales. Like, you're working on one sale, one transaction over the course of a couple of weeks or maybe months or even longer sometimes.
Yeah, you always have irons in the fire, right? If you're
Yeah.
depending on one sale, you're dead in this industry, unfortunately.
Yeah, and then we kind of had that epiphany where we're like, okay, we need to like lower the barrier of entry. And so we're doing events with IWC, and it's Formula One weekend coming up. We've got a Tag Heuer event, we got a Hublot event, we've got IWC event, we've got a Panerai event, a Blancpain event. Like, we've got so much shit. Um, and then on the flip side, I'm like, okay, now we're gonna go to like Citizen or like Boulevard or like Frederic Constant or like Alpina or like, I mean, just the other side, because it seems like we've been trending into those higher end brands, and people, we will literally have such a crazy turnout for people that want to come and show their watches off, like 30, 50, 60 people, like easily, right? Will come show their collections off, but we do a branded event, like 10 people, it's like, all right, that's the cocktail. Like that's the winning formula. Um, I'm sure you probably already answered this, and maybe you just didn't vocalize it, but what would you feel as the most rewarding part of being in the watch community?
Yeah, 100%. Again, it goes back to the people, right? It's like learning from collective experiences, learning from people's experiences, both on the watch side and on the personal side, right? Because through watch sales, right, I get to actually develop friendships with people. I don't really treat this business as a transactional endeavor. For me, it's not about just selling a watch. That's very zero sum. You win or you lose. You either sell the watch or you don't. For me, I want to establish a real personal relationship with people, not just selfishly because obviously I want them to work with me, but also because at the end of the day I get to learn from them, and that's really both on the personal side and the business side. Which again, that I think is the most rewarding part of this industry. I've been able to meet people I never would have otherwise met, and or never would have otherwise even thought of meeting. And now I have the opportunity not just of meeting them, but speaking to them and learning from them. And yeah, that's definitely the best part.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Coming to the end of our time here, I have a couple more questions. Sounds like obviously you wear multiple hats. I mean, you are a dealer by day, content creator, influencer, whatever whatever you want to call yourself by night.
It makes me
Uh,
so cringe so badly.
I'm
But sure,
I'm
yeah,
sorry, content. That's why I said content creator. Come on, give
yeah,
me some slack.
that's
Um, what's next for you? And do you have any exciting projects, goals? Something we can look back at and kind of measure like where you're at in your career.
yeah, man. That's such an interesting question. A lot of the goals I have are personally related. Like I'd love to get married in the next 5 years, kind of thing, that kind of stuff. Because the thing is, ever since joining Berdines, it's such. I know this sounds like obviously very cliche, but it's an amazing organization. Like I have so much freedom and flexibility to do essentially what I want, right? On a buy, sell, trade kind of scenario, but also in terms of just straight up like content side of things, right? I get the opportunity to speak about pretty much whatever I want, whenever I want, within reason, obviously. This is still a business, and I have to represent it, faithfully and to the best of my ability. So, but otherwise, I kind of get freedom and liberty all over the place, and that's it's almost like I'm running my own business within Bertines, right? And so my goal is really to just keep expanding that, reach new people, reach new collectors, and hopefully continue to build my name and showcase why I feel I'm the guy in the industry that everybody should deal with, and hopefully that passion and that experience will resonate with people, and they'll choose to do business with me or not, or just consume my content, because I get so much validation and enjoyment from people saying to me, people I've never sold a watch from, like, oh, hey, I do business with this person, but I love your content. I just love your content in general. That kind of stuff, I eat it up, because listen, at the end of the day, I put a lot of time and effort into it, and I'm super passionate about this hobby, and it's not that easy to put yourself out there, right? There's a lot of people online who will flame you for things you say or do, and that's part of being an online
Totally.
personality, content creator, if you will. And but it's such a rewarding experience at the same time.
You realize if you get married, right, you're never buying another watch, right?
That's why I'm waiting. That's why I said 30.
Okay.
That's why I said 30, 30, 30.
I have tried to figure out the kind of
What's
like
the balance? Yeah.
happy ratio, and when boxes show up at the door, I'm like, okay, well, when I see a few boxes that show up at the door, that means I can bring a few boxes,
Right.
like, all right. And then my wife's like, oh, what's that you're wearing? Oh, I've had this. Like, what
Yeah,
do you,
yeah. I changed the bezel on it. You didn't
yeah,
know.
I changed the strap. Like,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, best of luck to you in that regard. But and finally, and let's just speak subjectively, right? And obviously, we live in a fairy tale world, which we call watches. But if you could collaborate with any brand, past, present, or even like industry leader,
Yeah.
who would it be? What would it be?
That's an
And
excellent question.
what would come from it?
If I had to, like, let's say, like, have dinner with anybody in the industry, right? Uh, for me, it would have to be Abraham Louis Breguet, the greatest watchmaker of all time. Hans Wilsdorf is definitely up on the list, just from a business perspective, business side of things. But if I could collaborate with anybody in the industry, it would be my personal favorite brand, and that would be an MBNF, and I would love to collaborate with them on some kind of special legacy machine perpetual, which is my personal grail watch. I always said that that's my grail watch, and I stand by it. I think it's one of the most amazing watches ever made, and I think it's this ingenious contraption, and it's just amazing. I'm a huge fan of Max Buser and his watches and the MBNF brand, and you know what? If I could collaborate with them, that would be an insane dream of mine.
I'm sure there's going to be people that are going to be echoing that dream for sure.
Yeah.
Um, wow. I mean, we're reaching the top of the hour. We have covered almost 20 questions, which I didn't expect to do. Like, sometimes like we just kind of pace it a little differently.
Sure.
We went over a ton. But we've kind of been doing this like weird little thing. I feel like it's very appropriate, where we essentially turn over our platform to you. Is there anything you feel like we didn't cover? Is there anything you want to address directly? Is there anything you want to say that we didn't talk about? If so, here's the opportunity.
Yeah, no, I think we pretty much covered everything. Obviously, if people are listening and they don't know about me, then I would urge them to check out, my socials, be it on Instagram, watch.marco, or, check out my YouTube channel. I'm over on Berdine's Jewelry on YouTube. And yeah, like, I hope to hear from you guys, and learn from your experiences, and hopefully earn your business someday. And no, thank you so much, Blake, for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure. We covered so many topics, and I can't get enough about watches, so like I work in the industry. I love the industry, and I love the watches. So yeah, no, this is awesome.
Yeah, everybody, we will be sure to link Marco down in the description of this podcast or the YouTube, wherever you're listening from. Be sure to check out Marco, watch.marco on Instagram. Again, he said a bunch of times he's at Bardine's, which is in Chicago. Make sure you reach out to him if you're considering getting your next piece. And we will definitely have you on again in the future. We've only had our first guest come back once.
Okay.
And it was Mike Pearson, who went from Zodiac to Christopher Ward.
Nice.
But no, we're gonna start planning to check back with people. So in the future, we'll definitely check back with you, see where you're at on your goal, right? Maybe you'll be married, maybe you'll have new watches. Thank you again for coming on and spending the time with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Humbled to be here as your host, and thank you as always for spending time with us.
Absolutely, the pleasure's all mine, man. Thank you so much.
You got it. Bye bye.